Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon, and I've made no secret out of the fact that I'm a giant Trails nerd. I love Trails, guys. It's without question my favorite video game series, and even my favorite long-form story. The Lord of the Rings? Take a hike into an active volcano. ABC's Lost? Take your own advice and get lost. The Bible? Well, wait, hang on. Maybe I don't want to do a disparaging the Bible joke. Let's just not. Let's move on. But my point is, Trails stands head and shoulders above every other story for me. However, that doesn't mean I don't have issues with it. As with any piece of media, it's flawed. And of course, what is flawed is going to be subjective, but these are issues that I think hold the series back from even greater heights. With the advent of the Trails in the Sky First Chapter remake, and most likely future remakes, this is a perfect time for Falcom to fix some of the issues they missed the first time around. Stick around, guys, you're gonna want to see all of my spicy takes. They're so spicy. Oh, real quick, special thanks to the JRPG Pursuit Podcast Discord for sharing their Trails gripes with me. I found a lot to agree with in their list. Oh, and check out the JRPG Pursuit if you haven't already. We talk about JRPGs every week. It's great. Link in the description. Okay, let's get to it. This first issue is actually kind of a great problem to have. The cast of the Trails series is absolutely ginormous, but there are very few, maybe even zero, absolute stinkers. The Sky arc has a solid core of main characters, and the Crossbell arc hones that down even further. Definitely quality over quantity. Then Cold Steel happened, and suddenly the series exploded with 1,000 playable characters, which makes a game like Trails into Reverie impossible to get your head around. The benefit of having such a large cast in Cold Steel is that you really get a ton of variety to pick your favorites from. The downside is you really don't get to spend as much time with each party member as they deserve. The character development had always been top-notch in Trails, and even in Cold Steel, they do an admirable job given the circumstances, right? But trimming down the cast of playable characters to a more reasonable number would allow more screen time and more development. Now, this might be the hardest change to implement. The Trails series is like a Jenga tower right now. If they go into the middle of the tower and start yanking pieces out, we might lose the whole structure. So if this one is a bit unrealistic, let's try and tackle another one that I think has a better shot of happening. The Cold Steel arc is by far the longest. The Sky arc technically has 3 games, though really Trails in the Sky the Third functions more as a transitional game, in that it has a new protagonist and a completely different structure than any other Trails game until Reverie. The Crossbell arc is 2 games. Daybreak has parts 1 and 2, though you could of course argue the upcoming Trails Beyond the Horizon is basically Daybreak Part 3. But standing tall and proud right in the middle of the series is Cold Steel, with 4 main parts and a healthy chunk of Reverie under its belt. That is a lot of games. And the sheer quantity of game isn't the only issue. The structure of Cold Steel is a bit redundant too. Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 3 have a very similar structure, as do Cold Steel 2 and Cold Steel 4. Cold Steel 1 and 3 involve you going around with your group, learning about the world, all while the machinations of the bad guys are prepared in the background. Cold Steel 2 and 4 are the culmination of those machinations, with all of your characters having to fight their way through ridiculous odds to resolve all the conflicts. Now, if you've been following the Trails series, you might recognize that pattern as pretty much the way Falcom handled every arc. A setup game that introduces the characters and the particular region of the world, followed by an execution game that brings all that prep work together for an epic conclusion. My question is, why does Cold Steel do it twice? And does it need to be 4 games? I'd honestly like to see Cold Steel trimmed with a scalpel. Make some precision cuts to all 4 games and create a duology, Cold Steel 1 and 2, that tell the entire story of Erebonia without needing to be stretched out for 300 hours. There are bits of the story we could lose without sacrificing much, and if they were to similarly find a way to trim down the number of important characters, the story could be told in a much more streamlined way. I'm not saying they need to just kill off a bunch of characters to make the story better, but... Okay, this has been a complaint about the series I've had for a long time. It's not Cold Steel centric, it's really across the board. The Trails series has always been extremely afraid to kill a character off. Not that it's never happened, but I really think I could count on one hand the number of truly important characters who have died. And it's not just important characters. Prior to Daybreak, the series went out of its way to keep anyone from dying, even minor characters off screen. In a game that involves so much war, the complete lack of death doesn't just hurt the story by reducing the stakes, it undermines a lot of the points about war the writers are trying to make. Case in point, without spoiling anything, let me just say that an enormous event happens in Trails into Reverie, an event that the characters fear has taken the lives of hundreds of innocent people. But don't worry, the writers made sure that all the people who might have been hurt were coincidentally out for the day, so it was really just property damage. It took what could have been an immense demonstration of the villain's power and turned it into essentially a prank. I mean, a really expensive prank. I don't know what the property insurance situation is like in the land of Erebonia, but I have to imagine their premiums are pretty high. But do you see what I'm saying? We as the audience wouldn't have been devastated by the loss of life from this attack. They would be nameless NPCs, but it would have signaled to us that this is some serious stuff. Instead, it made the bad guys seem incompetent and their power feel incredibly nerfed. And a series like Trails relies on having strong villains to make its story impactful. Oh, speaking of villains. This might go hand in hand with Falcom's seeming unwillingness to kill off characters, but another major issue I and a lot of us in the community have with the writing is the writers' seeming unwillingness to have real and lasting consequences for the villains in the story. It feels like far too many villains quickly learn the error of their ways and go on to become helpful people to the heroes in the future. The horrible sins they've committed are basically forgotten almost instantly, not just by the everyday citizens, but by the major characters, i.e. the people who the villains have harmed the most. It's extremely illogical. Even villains who do suffer some consequences for their actions still tend to fall into this trap. At least one of them ends up helping you out from prison. It's silly. I think a redemption story for a villain can be an incredibly powerful thing, but overusing it like this tends to rob it of its weight. It can't be an easy path. If it is, then it isn't earned, and that makes it unsatisfying. And it's a shame because usually, up until the somewhat disappointing end of each villain's story, Trails tends to have some of the most compelling and interesting villains in RPGs. I think with a remake of the game's post-Sky, I'd like to see that redemption earned. Yes, if it's necessary, the villains can still make a turn to the light side, that's fine. But don't make it so easy for them, Falcom. Give us a front seat to their redemption story. It shouldn't be quick. If anything, it should be a slow and painful process. Slow and painful. Slow and painful. This is, I think, my only real gameplay-focused criticism, and some of you will be screaming in the comments that they've already fixed this problem with the creation of high-speed mode. That's right, I'm talking about the absolute snail's pace that the battles move by default. As Trails fans, most of us have gotten used to high-speed mode. It's the default setting, for most of us, honestly. We don't even think about it anymore. But what high-speed mode does is put a band-aid over a real gameplay problem. The game shouldn't need to be sped up 3x in order to be enjoyable. Seriously, the gameplay in the first... 10 entries? Jeez. The gameplay in the first 10 entries feels so slow without high-speed mode on that the characters literally look like they're moving in slow motion. I know that's just a reaction from having spent so much time with high-speed mode on, but still, the gameplay is so slow without it. Now, starting with Trails through Daybreak, I've turned off high-speed mode, and I'm happy to say I never felt the urge to turn it on even once. Falcom has corrected that issue, and the game plays fast and smooth, and it's fantastic. Since the new Sky remake seems to be made on the same engine as Daybreak, I have a feeling this is one item on my change wish list that actually will happen. I just hope all the games get this full-on treatment, because the middle entries, especially the Cold Steel arc, they'll just feel so sluggish and weird by comparison if they don't get this change. You can blame this one on Persona. At least, I assume you can. Here's the thing. Trails needed to shake itself up every so often. Any series running for that many years can start to feel stale if every game plays exactly like the game before it. So naturally, in the lead up to Trails of Cold Steel, Falcom wanted to experiment with its storytelling. In general, I applaud this. In execution, I boo it? Whatever the opposite of applaud is. Of course, I'm talking about the harem. Yes, now instead of a delightful canon romance worked into the story, every single female character is desperately in love with Hiro-kun. And you, the player, get to choose who he ends up with. Reen's a cool guy, but I mean, seriously? Nobody in Class 7 is interested in Gtheos? Super studly foreign exchange student? Nah, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Now, to be fair, even though Trails of Cold Steel gets the brunt of the criticism for turning into a harem anime before our very eyes, it was actually the previous arc, Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure, that pioneered this new vision. In the Crossbell arc, your main character is Lloyd Bannings, and even though it's not as explicit, your choices in the story do actually have an impact on who ends up going all hubba hubba over our favorite golden retriever of a policeman. Still, far, far smaller portions of those games focused on the harem element, so I'm going to focus my criticism on Cold Steel. Like I said, every major female character is interested in Reen. As characters, they have absolutely no agency when it comes to romance. They can't express interest for any other character because doing so would make them unavailable to Reen, and by extension, you, the player. The harem trope robs the story of so much richness. I mean, look, obviously the Trails series is not romance focused. It never has been, and I wouldn't want it to be. But the romance in the first arc, romances really, they added a lot to an already fantastic story. By inserting a harem into the plot, what we really get is a subtraction. A complete subtraction of romance as a possibility. Not just for the main character, but for every other major character in the story. If that doesn't bum you out, check your pulse. You might be dead. If the Cold Steel games get the remake treatment, and hey, I'm open to it if for no better reason than to upgrade the combat to be in line with the rest of the series, then Falcom has an opportunity to throw out this dated harem stuff and give us a solid story with real and realistic character relationships. Maybe Emma has a thing for Eustace. Elisa can hook up with Elliot. I could see Laura maybe having a thing for Reen, but more likely I think she'd be uninterested in romance and want to just focus on swinging that giant sword around. You go, girl. Free the characters to have their own stories, Falcom. Please. Oh, and I guess while we're on the subject of romance... Okay, talking about this subject usually gets me in trouble with a subset of YouTube viewers who have a disturbingly detailed understanding of Japanese age of consent laws, but I'm gonna hold my nose and just get through it. There are, in particular, a couple of characters who are sort of paired up in a way that is extremely gross. I'm talking about Agate and Tita, naturally. When they meet, Tita is a rambunctious 12-year-old and Agate is a sprightly 29. Now, to be clear, they are not in a relationship, not at any point in the story, at least not so far. But the other characters joke about them being in a romantic relationship, and it's a joke that seems to be loved by almost every member of the team. That's weird, right? Speaking as a Westerner, and I don't know, I'm probably speaking for most Easterners too, but it's very odd and uncomfortable the way the characters joke about it. It makes me like them less, you know what I mean? If you had a friend who constantly joked about your 30-year-old buddy hooking up with a preteen child, maybe you'd give an awkward chuckle the first time, right? Like you're trying to be polite and you're not looking to start a fight for what was probably just a severe misfire of a joke. But then he says it again, and again, and again. He bends over backwards to find ways to work this almost literal cradle-robbing joke into every conversation. Eventually you'd just be sick of it, right? I think I've made my point. In the Calvert arc, i.e. the current arc as of the filming of this video, there's also the case of Agnes and Van. Agnes is 17, Van is around 25. I know there's fear about grooming, but Van clearly has no interest in Agnes in a romantic way, so I would say he's off the hook. Van's true love is, and always will be, his truck. Sorry shippers, this stud is taken. Now, I don't want to be all negative about love stories in the Trails series, but I do have to do it one more time. A lot of straight people are afraid of gay people. It's often because they were taught at home or at church that gay people were weird or even that gay people were bad. Fortunately, we're beginning to evolve as a species, at least a little bit, and that view is far less prevalent today than it was decades ago. Even more socially conservative countries like Japan are finding more ways to include LGBT characters in fiction in positive ways. Unfortunately, Trails hasn't always done the best job at that. For the most part, characters that are either explicitly gay or bisexual, or characters that are at least coded as gay, have some very troubling tendencies. They tend to make a lot of extremely unwanted advances on characters that have absolutely no interest in them making said advances. A certain purple-haired motorcyclist in the Cold Steel arc most prominently comes to mind. Having said that, I feel like the Calvard arc has been at least a bit better in that regard, so maybe they're learning from their mistakes. Still, now that they have an opportunity to make corrections, I think it'd be great if they went ahead and fixed that issue up where it occurs earlier in the story as well. What do you think? Not just about LGBT representation, but in general. Are you with me on some of these? Am I crazy for some of these? Let me know down in the comments. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you've stuck around, would you consider subscribing if you haven't already? Also, one more plug, check out the JRPG Pursuit podcast. We're going to be at the Southeast Game Exchange down in Greenville, South Carolina. So if you're in the area, I hope you'll come out and say hi. Anyway, with all that, until next time, bye.